Hello to my fellow mystery lovers. How are you doing today? I'm super excited. We're going to read another chapter. Today is chapter 11, and it is a very special chapter because we are introduced to the Jericho Falls Opera House. And I wanted to just share a little bit of the behind the scenes of the story with you guys today, because Jericho Falls is, of course, a fictitious city. It's completely made up, but it's a conglomerate of some of my favorite ghost towns. I love ghost towns. I love visiting ghost towns. I love the whole era of the gold rush. And a very big influence on Jericho Falls is Virginia City, Nevada, to me. And so the opera house that we have in the story is largely inspired by the Piper's Opera House in Virginia City. This is a vintage picture of what it looked like back in the day. And I have an interior image too to show you. This is what the inside was back in the day. And isn't it a beautiful stage though? It's very ornate, and in this day and age they're still having events in Virginia City at the Opera House. It's an amazing place. If you're into this kind of thing at all, I highly recommend that you get and you follow them on Instagram and find out about all the fun things that they're still doing at Piper's. And it's very authentic. Very little has changed in the building, and they just do a fabulous job of keeping the history alive. And so that is a little behind the scenes. You'll be able to kind of envision what I was thinking of a little bit when I wrote the Jericho Falls Opera House into this story. And we're going to go there this time, chapter 11, On My Tiptoes. I fully intended to go straight home, but at the risk of taking Grandma Lily cold food, I decided to make one more stop. What was the microwave in her fancy new kitchen for, after all? I was only 2 blocks from the original Jericho Falls Opera House, Art's place of employment. It was as good a time as any to meet his boss that Jeannie spoke of, Mariah Langley. After a short walk, I stopped to examine the facade of this impressive old building. It was brick, with 3 sets of large double doors on the ground floor. In its heyday, all of them would be opened to let crowds of showgoers enter and exit. On the second story were 4 tall, narrow windows to let in the light before the days of electricity. The top of each window was adorned with a golden eagle, wings spread. The building's ornate roof came to a rounded peak and copper spire, now green with age. It was a Jericho Falls landmark and a tribute to a brand of entertainment lost to history. The middle set of doors stood ajar, so I went in. The interior of the space was as impressive as the outside. The ceiling was open to the second floor. Narrow balconies ran along each side. At the front was a stage with thick red velvet curtains. Little had been done throughout the years to change the room. The damask wallpaper was over 100 years old, and the wooden folding chairs remained original. Remodeling or renovating seemed sacrilegious in a place where so many early settlers and pioneers spent their rare free time. And so it had an air of antiquity that was charming and beautiful. I loved that our town had kept this building safe, sturdy, and authentic. The notion of a Best Western or Applebee's up the street was a different story. A boy in his late teens was sweeping with a small white dog at his side. The fluffy pooch ran towards me with a yap. "Hello there," I said to the dog, hesitant to reach down and pet him just yet. "That's Judge," the boy said. "What a unique name. How did you come up with it?" "Kind of embarrassing, really," the boy said, with an aw shucks look. "I got him when I was 10, when I decided I wanted to be an attorney like my dad." "Wow, that's great. You shouldn't be embarrassed at all." I sized up this young man with big aspirations. I felt a little envious. I hoped he didn't abandon his goals like I had mine. "If you want tickets for tonight's show, you'll have to come back in an hour when the box office opens." "I'm not here for the show. I was hoping to talk to someone who knew art." The teen winced. "He's not here." He took off his baseball cap and scratched the top of his head. I know. I pressed my lips together. Did you know that he's dead? He asked, staring at the broom instead of meeting my eyes. Yes, I do. Art and my grandmother were friends. Suddenly, I had an idea. She was thinking of renting the opera house for his funeral. The boy turned to look at me suspiciously. Who's your grandmother? Lily Martin. I'm Chloe. He nodded slowly, seeming to assess me and my story. He took a step backward. You should probably talk to my sister. She's the boss. You rang? A big voice came out of a tiny woman, barely 5 feet tall. She walked toward us wearing a pair of coveralls that were several sizes too big for her, carrying a ladder. Her hair was styled in a pixie that suited her sprightly size. I heard what you were saying, she began. You must be the granddaughter Lily's always talking about. But working on funeral arrangements already? She frowned, drawing her light-colored eyebrows together. Well, I cleared my throat and thought fast. Nothing firm yet, but I offered to help Grandma Lily get started. The woman seemed to soften. Lily's such a sweetheart. She and Art were great together. I'm not surprised she'd want to do something productive, considering the circumstances. She dabbed the corners of both eyes with the sleeve of her coveralls. I'm sorry to get emotional. We're all in shock about this. I mean, murder here in Jericho Falls? She wiped her palms on her pants leg and put out a hand. I'm Mariah Langley. This is my baby brother, Luke. Luke waved, still leaning on the broom. I managed the opera house and Art was my handyman, but he did so much more around here. I only met him once, I said. She smiled, nodded, and wiped at her eyes again. Let's go to my office, she offered. Follow me, but watch your step. She motioned to a bright yellow wet floor sign standing in our path. We had a spill last night. I followed Mariah toward the stage and then past it. A small door led down a deep staircase. This was the basement, where props, costumes, and all the pieces and parts of their productions were stored. In one corner of the chaos, Mariah had arranged an antique folding screen. Behind it was a modest but functioning office space with an oak desk and neatly organized files. She suggested I take a seat in one of the 2 old-fashioned theater seats across from her desk. What a nice little nook, I said. It's kind of dark down here, but I love being in the midst of everything that makes this place work. Plus, I can hide away from everyone when I need to. She winked, reached into a drawer, and withdrew a black book. Let's look at the calendar, she suggested. When do you think Lily would like to hold the funeral? Well, everything is tentative right now, I said. That was putting it mildly. Actually, there was a full-scale murder investigation in the works, and Grandma Lily had no idea I was here. We would just like to know if your venue would be an option. Of course, said Mariah. We wouldn't have it any other way. That's wonderful. Can we call you to discuss the details? Sure. Thanks, that's a big load off. So how long did Art work here? I asked. Mariah shrugged. I can't remember. He came a short time after I did. Why do you ask? We should mention it in the eulogy, I lied. Mariah seemed to buy it. It was right around a year ago, I suppose, she explained. I came just a few months before. I was thankful when he applied for my job posting. I needed a good handyman, but also someone polished enough so he could help out in other ways. Like as an usher, I said, thinking of Art standing in the foyer of Jericho House, wearing fancy attire and seeming the epitome of a gentleman. Right. Art told me he was a maitre d' at upscale restaurants at one time. That's how he honed his sophisticated style. He treated people like celebrities when they came to the opera house, and he had a charm that everyone fell for. If she only knew. How many others work here? My brother, part-time of course. He graduated from high school last year and is taking a few college courses, and then one other guy as needed. It's a lot for a small staff to manage, more so now without Art. She looked pained. You must be a close-knit group, I said, hoping she'd elaborate on any strife that might exist. Mariah only nodded. Darn, this sleuthing stuff was a lot harder than it looked on TV. Mariah, can you think of anyone in town who had it out for Art? I really don't know anything about his personal life. Sorry. Did you get along with him? Me? Yes. I was talking to Jeannie at the restaurant, and she said you seemed irritated with Art last week. Mariah stared at me. Her smile had faded. Are you accusing me of something? Because he was my best employee. In fact, I'm not sure how I'm going to get by without him, especially with the Founders' Day ball coming up. Oh, geez. I had crossed the line. I had to think fast. I let out a dramatic sigh and dropped my face into my hands. I'm so sorry. This has been such a terrible ordeal. Grandma Lily is sick with grief. I don't know what to do. I heard Mariah's chair scoot back, then footsteps. She placed a hand on my shoulder. I understand. You're trying to get to the bottom of this for Lily's sake, she said. I nodded, without saying a word, still covering my face. But it's best to leave it to the police, Chloe, Mariah added. Just then, I heard someone coming down the stairs. Their steps grew closer, and when I looked up, a middle-aged man popped his head inside the partition. Come on in, Malcolm. This is Chloe. She's Lily Martin's granddaughter, Mariah said. Malcolm stepped into the office space wearing the same usher uniform I had seen on Art. But while Art looked like $1 million in his outfit, Malcolm looked disheveled. His boots were dirty and scuffed, and the collar of his shirt was rumpled in the back. His jacket had dingy wrinkles at the elbows, like it hadn't been cleaned in ages. He nodded toward me, but said nothing. What can I do for you? Mariah asked him. I need to talk to you, he said, without a smile or apology for interrupting us. I was just leaving, I blurted. I'll ask my grandma to call you, Mariah. Will you be staying in Jericho Falls for long? She asked. I'm not sure, I said. We should have coffee sometime. Sure, we'll keep in touch, I said. Maybe another visit with Mariah would put her at ease, so she would tell me more. She hadn't given me much to go on today. I stood to leave, grabbing the bag of food from the floor beside me. As I shuffled to the partition exit, I expected Malcolm to step aside to let me pass. But instead, he stepped an inch or two toward me, forcing me to squeeze past him. His shoulder brushed mine. Once again, I walked across the storage room, taking in the vast amount of props, scenery, and costumes contained there, and wondered what Malcolm had to say. I wanted to find out. Since I had easily heard him coming down the stairs, I knew they'd be able to hear me leave as well. So I made a point to clomp up loudly, but then I crept back down on my tiptoes. I got close enough to hear Malcolm say, Art's gone now, so I want his job. Okay, you guys, that was chapter 11. Things are heating up. We're meeting lots of the players, lots of the potential suspects, you could say, and we got to visit the Jericho Falls Opera House. I hope you enjoyed today's chapter, and if you did, would you please give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you can hear chapter 12 coming up soon. I sure appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.